Hello. Hi. My name is Kim Davis and I'm from the Nebraska Commission for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. I am located in the Lincoln office and I am a field representative. We are now on the next webinar presentation. For those who are deaf, deafblind, or hard of hearing in Nebraska, focusing on resources and in the advocacy handbook, as I put up here on the PowerPoint. Today's presentation on the advocacy handbook, the advocacy handbook does have several different life topics that it is covering. Today we're actually going to be focusing on the housing section. Let's proceed. Before I begin, I do need to let you know a disclaimer about the rights, meaning for this education, this handbook, and webinar both, this advocacy and resources is provided only to give you information and resources, and it is designed for those who are deaf, deafblind, and hard of hearing Nebraskans. This is designed to help you on how to let you know of you as a consumer, your rights, how to protect yourself with the federal, state laws. And here our webinar is not to provide you any legal advice. That is not our intent. I am not an attorney. I am just providing you information that is out there. The resources for you to be able to proceed and guide you to assist with becoming your best self-advocate. To let you know, this handbook was developed in July of 2015. And this webinar is then connected with that handbook at that time, all the legal rules and regulations based on the time of July 2015. Laws and regulations do change. There are amendments. The current information that is out there today, please look that up if any of those information has changed. It's important to remember that this is only based on the information as of July 2015. And we will update the handbook itself as time goes on. And it is no copyrights related with this handbook. We encourage you to share this with others. For those related in the housing, either landlords or those who do provide programs and services that are in coordination with the housing or rent or even purchasing, and trying to get financial assistance within those areas, or even financial assistance within nursing home and assisted living centers. We encourage you to share those with those people involved. It is available on our website also. Here is a housing overview. What topics will be covered within there? There's 4 different categories. The Fair Housing Act, Section 8, Section 8 Housing, Landlord and Tenants, and Assisted Living. Those are the 4 areas that will be covered through this webinar today. Legal history, knowing our history, is very important to relate it with our civil rights. Under the housing webinar, the Housing Act and the amendments, Fair Housing Amendments, also is included. First, in 1968, the Fair Housing Act was passed. That was the first one legally, and then the amendment was added. This prohibited discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, and national orientation. meaning if you're from another country. But the people with disabilities and families were not covered under the original Act, so there was an amendment added in 1988, and that expanded the language of the law to also protect those and prohibited discrimination for services and programs related with housing. Discriminating against those who, in general, have a disability, and people that are deaf, blind, and hard of hearing would be also covered under that, including the family members. For example, mother and father of children that have disabilities would be covered under this. It is included. And then with the Fair Housing Act, it is on the federal level legislation. The Landlord-Tenant Act, which passed in 1974, it is the state of Nebraska legislation. In general, it says those who do rent, either an apartment, house, or any other facility, is covered under this. Technically, it does not matter if it's federal financing, but it is federal finances is included also. In general, it does follow still this legislation. For example, the Housing Urban Development, HUD, would be under this as a state law of the Landlord-Tenant Act of 1974. In general, very common concerns do come up in regards to housing for those who are deaf, blind, and hard of hearing. Sometimes a person could be denied or waived or providing service, for example, for service animals and trained hearing dogs, or even a trained sighted dog for the blind. Both would be covered. And for hard of hearing also, they do have an assisted hearing dog that can assist too. Under federal law, it does say these are allowed to be permitted. Or visual signalers for those that are hard of hearing who need an amplified and for audible sounds on calls or fire alarms, being visual. Like at home, when you have one, if it's not one that is connecting with the information, having that alarm is a sensor is very important to have that visual. It specializes for those when a fire alarm goes off, it would signal and increase the sound or increase a visual lighted option, or even a tactile type through a held device or that is remote and that would vibrate to provide a tactile. And also for the system, many different kinds of alarm systems that are available out there. For example, the common, I'm not sure if I'm providing this exactly right, but the common right is also included. But there's many common problems out there that provide effective communication between those individuals. So those, if you're having a monthly planning meeting, what the rules are, maybe possibly going over the lease and agreements, and if they're investigating damage. So, you don't want to provide without, when you're moving in and agreeing to information, you want to make sure that you have communication access. This could mean that they would need to bring in an interpreter, could need to write back and forth, have a proctor assisted listening devices, or other communication using real services for understanding or through a third party. There's several different types of examples to consider, and being open to meeting your communication needs. Next, moving on to the Fair Housing Act. Remember, the amendment that was added in 1988 prohibited landlords or condo management supervisors or homeowner associations also. They would be included where they were prevented from discriminating. It was prohibited based on a disability. So group manager, the landlord, people selling homes, or the homeowner association were prohibited from discrimination or prevention based on disability alone. If for a rent or selling a house or places of residence. So knowing that a place is available, they can't say you are not qualified to be here based on your disability. If there's any rules or accommodations, what list of information that are different than others, it's prohibited. People that are hearing or without disabilities, they should have the same standards for those that do. They are not allowed to provide different standards for somebody that has a disability. That was illegal. The Americans Disability Act, Title III, would also cover this. So it applies with the federal law based on access to communication. Plus, it is your responsibility, it is their responsibility to provide you effective communication. Some other examples of the responsibilities for the landlord or homeowner association or managers and the like. For example, they're not permitted, if pets are not permitted, they have to then consider service animals. Those who are deaf or deafblind or hard of hearing that do have a trained listening or hearing dog, or for deafblind, using trained dogs. For some apartments or resident areas or possible retirement communities, they do have prevention, or you can't go in without a code. If you don't know the code, that means you have to ring the doorbell. And that's a little bit of a concern for those most of the time are related with connecting through the phone. A signaling or noise system for a person to be able to ring a bell to be able to communicate with the person inside, and finding the way to accommodate for those who are unable to hear. How to accommodate that system for you to be able to communicate and know that somebody is outside. They aren't able to enter until visiting a friend or UPS, or maybe you had done Amazon order, any of those dropping them off or coming in. It's important to have that access to communication through that intercom. For places like condominiums or homeowner associations, many times we'll have regular, or often they have meetings where they would speak about disagreements or information or changes within the environment of where there is a resident. And being able to provide you access to the communication, if that does include an interpreter, or for those that are hard of hearing, if they prefer captioning, that could be another option. Bringing in CART, or providing a loop system, or other assisted listening devices. Those should be considered as part so that you can be involved with those meetings. For example, one homeowner association in my area had $150 a month, and the cost of getting access and of effective communication, the money for the people would contribute were plenty to cover that as costs. Something to consider is how much that they have, what do they put aside to provide effective communication for those who are deaf, blind, or hard of hearing within their area. Sometimes when we do face those frustrating situations, which happen ever so often, it's hard to prove that discrimination took place. For example, sometimes it's just a smile and a handshake going, "Oh, I'm sorry, there's nothing available," and they are very vague. When a person is friendly, it's very hard to prove specifically that it was due based on discrimination. If things were in writing, that makes a big lot of difference, which helps your case to prove one way or the other. For example, somebody said, "Oh, no. People that are only working, have employment, are able to work here, not people with disabilities." So you know that they have labeled you as the person with disabled, and that discrimination happened. They say, "Oh, we lost your application. Oh man, it's gone." Can you prove that they really lost it or that they're discriminating? It's hard to say. Maybe they did never receive it within the mail. Maybe it did get lost within organization and filing. You never really know. The point is that you have to prove it was a discrimination. They may say, "Oh, maybe you would feel more comfortable in another neighborhood. Maybe if you moved over there, that you would be more comfortable." That, yeah, discrimination. Maybe if you're a person that is in a wheelchair, or you struggle to walk up steps, they say, "Oh, this building, it doesn't look good for you, and I don't, with a ramp, it wouldn't look good if I installed that. So I can't do that for you to have accommodations." That would be an example of discrimination. There's a few more. Also, some more examples in the book. Also, moving on to Section 8, Housing. Some people that are under the Housing Urban Development, HUD, in general, is for public housing projects. And that is based on income, with following the federal poverty guidelines and people that meet that. So they are receiving federal funds to a specific percentage of your rent. You pay some, and they are covered some under federal income. But all of this, it is based on income, family size, and they have a specific project group and area that the residents live under and the management is in charge of. And those that do live there do have the right of equality and the treatment that is the same as everyone else. On their services and the building and how it's run is all included. Feeling that you have the same services as those that are hearing. Sometimes with Section 8, they do provide you a voucher. It depends on income, or depending if you're able to live in that area, or if you're able to live in a house or another apartment or a different condo, or a landlord that does accept federal funds is part in there, so that the resident would pay partial of the rent and the voucher pays part of the rent. For the landlords, if they're receiving those federal funds, they also must be required to provide accommodations. For example, just like I had said before, this could include fire alarms, visual doorbells, and the like. It is their obligation. And then the landlord and tenants which could be under HUD or Section 8, or those that do not receive any federal assistance. For example, a person that is employed, there's no federal amount that's paid you, the resident pays the full amount, and just that public funded. All of those are under the Nebraska law related with the landlord and tenants. And specifically, for example, if you're looking at lease agreements, must be followed. Rent and security deposits prior to moving in. And that's for the purposes of those who, depending on the list and what the lease says, and when you're ready to move out, if there's no violation of the lease, no damage within the property, then receiving that money back. Or the eviction process and proceedings. And what they have to process they must follow to evict a resident. So, and then also property maintenance, such as mowing the lawn, and what is agreed upon between the landlord and tenant within the lease. And also when the lease is ended, if a lease is broken, and what proceeding has to follow for that. And also for privacy is included within this also. And within our advocacy handbook, we do strongly encourage you to print it and have that with you for the landlord. This is and our webinar also. That handbook could be a great resource for you to share with the landlord. If you are the renter, or if you're under HUD or Section 8. Now, focusing on those that are deaf, blind, and hard of hearing living within assisted living facilities or nursing homes. Some also independent living centers are under this also. If you're in there and you are receiving some medical assistance, you do have the right of knowing in advance what type of care you'll have, what kind of therapy will be included, and communication that's happening. I, as a deaf person, if I was the resident there, must also be included within that information. And you do have the right to know if there are any changes within the treatment or your care. You should be able to be aware of that, not confused and left out of communication to know what was going on. It's important to ask for that communication access if that does include an interpreter or assisted listening devices, or possibly you could use the UB Duo for communication. What your preference is to receive the effective communication and what's agreed upon with you and the facility. Being able to, and you have the right to speak out and provide a complaint or a grievance. You have that right to file a grievance without any retribution. and there should be no retribution for being able to do that. You have the right to complain and letting them know what are your objectives, what concerns you have, and what needs to be fixed. And you also need to be able to be informed when that information within that process. And if you refuse to receive some action or services, I feel well, and then but they may or may not benefit you. You feel that you can deny, they are not able to force you to take that service or care. And you have the right to be involved or refuse to be involved, saying, I do not want to be within that, and I have a right to not be involved within that activity. You also have the right to have phone services within your room. Do know that could be at your own expense. And discussing those services could be with the video, phone, or internet. That is sometimes a challenge because older buildings that don't have internet hookups and having that under Wi-Fi, sometimes the speed is not fast enough with the Wi-Fi. And how to solve that, what your preference is with the video phone. But if a phone line is within that, you could look at getting an amplified phone or a captioning phone. You have that right to have phone services within your room. Understand, this could be at your own expense as a resident there. Unless all the other residents receive the phone service for free, then you can also be included within that. And also, the Nebraska Department of Health and Human Services, you can file a grievance of discrimination with them in relation to the housing. I do really encourage you to take upon yourself to get your rights. And, if you ever have questions or concerns, please do contact us here at the Nebraska Commission for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. We have 5 offices within Nebraska now on different locations. The field reps are happy to help, provide you guidance and resources and how to empower yourself. And the Disability Rights Nebraska also can be included within, they were included within the handbook development, and they have a wealth of resources that I would be glad to share with you, or they could share with you also. And then any federally funded programs like HUD or Section 8, they do have overview for that also. So then you're thinking about, well, what do I do if I want to self-advocate? What's really important is to empower yourself by educating yourself. And there's a lot of different ways to look into researching what resources with federal laws, what applies to your situation, and how is that stated. So figuring out what are my rights, working with the facilities, bringing the wealth of information and resources that you have, and being able to work with them, with that landlord or that homeowner association, or even the manager of the facility, and applying that to your housing needs. Bring that resource information to be able to educate them. The more you are aware of, the more you can provide to see how you can solve the issue and have an agreement and upon the two of you. And if that doesn't work, then you can always file a grievance. Writing a grievance to send, it could be done in writing also, and if, again, that you can't come to an agreement or an understanding, then you can always get in touch with them. Also, if you are doing a grievance, you can do that with legal aid or of Nebraska Access Line or the Department of Health and Human Services. Those who are with federal funds, they do manage those, are with the Fair Housing Act in general, can be covered under this act. And for those that are in assisted living facilities, doing that research to get those resources about the legislations and regulations that are out there, knowing how to, if the director of the assisted living facility or that nursing home or even an independent living center or a senior center for those who have disabilities living there, no matter of the age, it's important to provide the director or the person that is running the facility the information. If it becomes unsuccessful, please reach out to the Department of Health and Human Services here in Nebraska. You are able to file a complaint with them to see if they'll be able to come in and support and advocate with you, or even get in touch with us here at the Nebraska Commission for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, or Disability Rights Nebraska. We are all happy to help and help you advocate. So with our webinar, and that was back in July of 2015, the website you can look at, you're looking at pages, can find the website on our website and get the handbook, is page 31 to 37 that goes over the housing information. And this is what it looks like if you're trying to find it. Here on our website, if you bring that up, it's a little bit tough to find, so I really encourage you, if you look here and find the box with the arrows right there. So you move the arrows over till you find publications and click on that word publications. It'll bring you up to another website. And that first one on there is NCDHH Advocacy Resource Handbook for Nebraskans who are deaf, blind, and hard of hearing. Click on that. And it's right there. I used the buttons Control F to find the word I wanted for housing. So it instantly brings us there. And right there, if you see this, you can look at this and educate yourself more on the resources that are out there. I don't have this on my PowerPoint directly, but the resource information is there. You just can go down and find it. So if it's HUD, then that's federal level. If you want more information and more webinars will be in ASL for this webinar. Plus, we're looking at captioning too. The resources about empowering yourself is increasing your knowledge. And that's what true self-advocacy is, having that resource and information ready to back you up to approach any situation. And I hope this information was helpful, this webinar was helpful also and can benefit you. Again, please get in touch with us or your field rep within your area. We have several different offices. I appreciate your time. Thanks for watching and have a fabulous day. Thanks. Bye-bye.